I won't pretend I planned this trip well. Not even close. My idea was simple. Get away from everything, spend a couple of nights in the wild, and clear my mind. The deep woods of northern Maine seemed like the perfect place. I didn't even bother booking a cabin, just stuffed my gear into my car and hit the road. By the time I reached the trailhead, it was creeping past 5:30 p.m., way later than I intended. The place was deserted. Not a single vehicle in sight. The sign at the entrance said the nearest shelter was a 5-hour hike away. 5 hours. I figured if I picked up my pace, I could make it by 10:30 at the latest. I had a flashlight, plenty of energy, and no real reason to worry. Still, something about that empty lot made my skin prickle. The first part of the trail wasn't bad. The air was crisp, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Trees stretched high above me, their branches knitting together in thick canopies. I moved at a steady clip, my boots crunching against the dirt path, the only sound in the eerie quiet. Too quiet now that I think about it. No birds, no rustling leaves. Just me. About 2 hours in, the sun dipped below the treetops, turning everything to shades of gray. I stopped by a mossy boulder to catch my breath and take a sip of water when I heard it. A soft crunch, like a footstep. My stomach clenched. I froze, my water bottle still halfway to my lips, straining to hear. Nothing. Just the soft hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. Probably a deer, I told myself. Maybe a small animal. But when I swung my flashlight around, its beam cut through the trees like a knife, illuminating absolutely nothing. Get a grip, I muttered, trying to shake off the unease. It was probably just my imagination. I shoved off the rock and kept moving, quickening my steps as the woods darkened. By the third hour, it was pitch black. My flashlight was my only lifeline, casting a thin beam that felt woefully insufficient. The trees had thickened, their twisted trunks looming like sentinels in the dark. Every few minutes, I thought I heard something, a rustle, the crack of a twig, but every time I spun around, there was nothing. The isolation pressed in. I kept telling myself it was just the forest playing tricks on me, that my mind was conjuring noises from the silence. But the feeling that I wasn't alone wouldn't go away. A crawling sensation prickled the back of my neck, like unseen eyes were locked on me. Then, at the 4-hour mark, I heard it again. This time, it wasn't subtle. A branch snapped, loud, deliberate, off to my left. My pulse shot into my throat as I spun, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The beam landed on nothing but twisted trees and tangled undergrowth, their shadows stretching in distorted shapes. Hello! My voice barely carried, brittle and absurd in the thick dark. Silence, then movement. A flicker in my periphery, something darting behind a tree. Hey! I shouted, more out of instinct than anything. My voice cracked and was swallowed by the forest. My heart pounded against my ribs, hammering so loud it drowned out everything else. I held my flashlight steady, aiming it at the tree where I'd seen movement, but nothing stirred. I backed away, my footsteps crunching against the dirt. The beam of my flashlight swung wildly, but the shadows were too thick, too deep. My breath came in shallow gasps, the kind you try to control but can't. Then it happened. A scream, high-pitched, warped, and impossibly loud. It sliced through the trees, echoing in all directions. I froze, every muscle locking up. It didn't sound human. It didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. Either. It sounded wrong. I don't remember deciding to run. 1 second I was standing there, and the next I was sprinting, my legs burning as I tore down the trail. My flashlight bounced wildly in my grip, illuminating roots and rocks I barely avoided. Behind me, footsteps, heavy, intentional, fast. I didn't dare look back. The trail blurred as I ran, lungs screaming for air, my mind racing with questions I didn't want answers to. What was out there? What did it want? Then silence. The footsteps stopped, but I didn't. I kept running, desperate to put as much distance as possible between me and whatever had been following me. When my legs finally gave out, I stumbled off the trail and collapsed behind a massive fallen tree. My chest heaved. My throat was raw. I switched off my flashlight and crouched low, gripping it like a weapon. The darkness was absolute. My hands trembled. I strained my ears for any sound. Then I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps, circling the tree I hid behind. I held my breath. The steps stopped. Something heavy scraped against the bark. I clenched my jaw, praying it couldn't hear the frantic pounding of my heart. Then silence. I stayed frozen, too afraid to move. Whatever was out there, it was waiting, watching. I knew this wasn't over. Time stretched endlessly. My muscles ached from crouching. My breaths came shallow and uneven. The flashlight sat dark in my trembling hands. I couldn't turn it back on. Not yet. Whatever it was, it would see me first. The footsteps had stopped, but the forest wasn't silent. Far away, the rhythmic chirping of crickets continued, eerily normal. But closer, sharp, unnatural sounds. The snap of twigs, the rustle of disturbed leaves. It hadn't left. It was circling me. I thought about running, but where? The trail was barely visible, even with the flashlight. And then there was that scream. I didn't want to hear it again. I definitely didn't want to find out what had made it. Time blurred. Then, from the silence, a whisper. Low, raspy, unintelligible. My blood turned to ice. It rose and fell like someone muttering to themselves. Each syllable jagged and wrong, like they hurt to say. I fumbled for my flashlight, every instinct screaming not to turn it on. But I couldn't sit there blind. My fingers found the switch, slick with sweat. I took a shaky breath, counted to 3, flicked it on. The beam cut through the blackness, and for a split second, I wished I hadn't done it. A figure crouched 10 feet away, its face obscured, hidden under a hood or maybe long, tangled hair. Its body was twisted, limbs bent at unnatural angles. One arm braced against the ground, the other stretched toward me. The light hit its face, and it recoiled, hissing. Its movements were jerky, like a puppet yanked by invisible strings. Before I could process what I was seeing, it scrambled backward into the shadows, vanishing. I didn't wait. I ran. Branches tore at me. Roots caught my boots. I didn't stop. When I burst into the trailhead clearing, my car was still there. But something else was too. A muddy handprint smeared across the driver's side window, the fingers impossibly long, fresh. I didn't stop to think. I yanked the door open, locked it, and sped off. In my rearview mirror, I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching. Its glowing eyes were the last thing I saw before the road curved out of sight. Even now, I don't know what I saw out there. I just know I'll never go back. There's a stillness in the Montana wilderness that feels like stepping into another world. No traffic, no voices, no deadlines. Just endless trees swaying under the wind's touch. This was what I needed, an escape, a reset. I parked at the trailhead, shouldered my backpack, and tightened my boots. The air was crisp, nipping at my skin in a way that made me feel awake. I checked my map, tucked it back into my pocket, and started walking. The sound of my boots crunching against the dirt was the only thing breaking the silence. The forest here was different. No distant chatter of hikers, no barking dogs, no markers at every trail split. Just untouched wilderness. I embraced the solitude, relishing the rare freedom that city life could never offer. The first couple of miles passed uneventfully. A chipmunk scurried across the path. A hawk soared high above. I paused once to adjust my pack and sip some water, letting the deep quiet settle into my bones. That's when I noticed something beyond the tree line. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. Sunlight filtering through the branches can create strange illusions. But as I squinted, I realized it wasn't a shadow. It was a person, a man standing still between the trees. Something about him was wrong. His limbs looked too long, his posture too rigid. He faced me, or at least I thought he did. The dappled light made it hard to tell, but his face looked smooth. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. I froze. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe a mask? A hunter? But who hunts without moving, without blinking? "Hey," I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the silence. No response, no movement, just that featureless stare. My pulse pounded as I took a step back, fingers tightening around my pack straps. I blinked, and he was gone. Not walked away, just gone, like he had never been there at all. I stared at the empty space where he had stood. My rational mind tried to reason it away. You're tired, your eyes are playing tricks on you. Shadows can be deceptive. I shook it off and kept moving, but my steps felt heavier. The woods seemed darker, quieter. When it came time to set up camp, I chose a spot away from the trail, just in case. By the time my tent was pitched, the sky was painted in hues of orange and violet. I ate a quick dinner, a bland, freeze-dried meal before exhaustion crept in. As the first stars appeared, I crawled into my tent and zipped it up tight. The forest at night is a different creature. The silence is so complete, it's almost deafening. Every rustle, every snap of a twig feels amplified. I lay there listening to my own breathing, convincing myself I was alone. At some point, sleep took me. I don't know how long I slept, but when I woke, the first thing I noticed was the cold. The air inside my tent was frigid, pressing against my face like an unseen breath. Then I realized the tent door was open, not just a little, completely unzipped. I shot up, heart hammering. Had I forgotten to close it? Had something woken me? My hands fumbled for my flashlight, and I swept the beam outside. The trees stood still. Nothing moved. I sat there for what felt like hours, flashlight in one hand, knife in the other. Eventually, I convinced myself it was a mistake. Maybe I had been so tired, I hadn't zipped it properly. That had to be it. I secured the tent again, triple-checking it this time, and laid back down. Sleep, however, didn't come easily. The night creaked and groaned around me. Every sound stretched too long. I didn't know it then, but the worst was yet to come. Morning light did little to ease my nerves. The unease lingered as I packed up camp. The forest felt heavier, as if the trees leaned in closer, listening. I forced myself onto the trail, focusing on the rhythmic crunch of my boots against the dirt. That's when I saw it. A bundle of sticks, bound tightly with rope, lay in the center of the trail. It wasn't large, but it was deliberately shaped, twisted into a crude human figure. My heart pounded. Someone had to have placed it there. Recently, I nudged it with my boot, half expecting it to crumble, but it held firm. The knots were tight. Some kind of joke? But who was out here to play games? And why? Muttering under my breath, I kicked it into the underbrush and kept moving. But the forest felt colder now, and the once soothing quiet had turned oppressive. Every snapping twig made me flinch. Every shifting shadow had me scanning the trees. By late afternoon, my unease had grown unbearable. I chose an even more secluded campsite that night, far from the trail. As darkness fell, I lit a small fire, hoping its warmth would ease my nerves. Didn't. Every crackle of the flames echoed too loudly. The shifting shadows felt unnatural. Movement, just at the edge of the firelight. I froze, eyes locked on the spot where I had seen something slip between the trees. "Hello," I called out, my voice unsteady. Silence. The wind whispered through the branches. I grabbed my flashlight and swept the beam across the forest. Nothing, but I knew someone was there. I doused the fire and retreated into my tent, zipping it up tightly. My knife felt useless in my grip, but I held it anyway. Then I saw them, two faint, glowing points high in the branches. Eyes, watching, unblinking. I wanted to believe it was a trick of the light, but I knew better. Those were eyes. I barely breathed. Time stretched into eternity. They never moved, never wavered. I was trapped, frozen in terror, until the first light of dawn crept into the tent. And just like that, the eyes were gone. I didn't move until the sun was high. When I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, my breath caught. An X, made of sticks and rope, lay in front of the tent flap. Deliberate, precise, a warning. I didn't bother eating. I packed as fast as I could and hit the trail. My knife stayed in my hand. My eyes darted to every shadow. Every tree. I wasn't alone. Then I heard it, the faint crunch of leaves behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I kept walking, heart pounding. Then a small rock landed behind me. Then another, deliberate, leading me forward. When I finally saw my car in the distance, relief nearly made me collapse. But then I saw it. Through the driver's window, something rested on the seat. A shirt, mine, ripped, stained dark. And beside it, another X of sticks and rope. My hands shook as I reached for the door handle, praying it was still locked. It was. Whoever left that inside had my keys, had been close enough to take them, close enough to stand inside my tent while I slept. I fumbled for my key, unlocked the car, and threw myself inside, locking the doors. As I backed out, I saw him, standing at the edge of the parking lot, just where the trees began. The faceless man. He didn't move, didn't chase. He just stood there, watching as I drove away. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that I'm still not alone. The Pacific Northwest had always pulled me in, its thick forests and mist-covered peaks feeling more like home than my tiny apartment back east. This trip was meant to be a break, a reset after years of non-stop work and routine. First, it was exactly what I needed. The crisp mountain air, winding roads that seemed to go on forever, and a solitude that finally let me think clearly for the first time in ages. But everything shifted when Rick arrived in Ashland. He stepped off the bus looking like he hadn't slept in days, pale, exhausted. I figured it was just the long trip or his usual complaints about being stuck in the wilderness, but there was something else, a jittery energy I couldn't quite name. "This place is weird," he muttered as I loaded his bag into the trunk. He kept glancing around like someone might be watching us, though the lot was empty except for an old, rusted station wagon. "Yeah, strangely beautiful," I teased, trying to lighten the mood. "You'll love it once we get out there." He didn't. The whole drive to the cabin, Rick barely said a word, staring out the window like the trees were closing in on us. And honestly, they did seem denser than before, almost alive. I told myself it was just the dim afternoon light or the thick clouds rolling in, but by the time we arrived, even I felt a little uneasy. The cabin wasn't much. An old, weathered structure with creaky floorboards and a faint, musty smell. The roof sagged slightly, like it had endured one too many storms. "Cozy?" I said, forcing a cheerful tone as I unlocked the door. "Cozy is just another word for haunted," Rick muttered, tossing his bag onto the couch. It wasn't a joke, though. The way he looked at me made my stomach twist. Inside, the cabin felt even smaller than I'd expected. A single buzzing light bulb hung in the living room. The kitchen was barely more than a counter with a sink and an outdated stove. The windows were small, and when I peeked out, all I could see was a solid wall of dark green stretching in every direction. We unpacked in silence. Rick kept checking his phone, even though we both knew there was no signal out here. He had this habit of pacing when he was anxious, and by the time I set my bag down, he was already wearing a path into the old carpet. "What's wrong?" I finally asked, trying to sound casual. "Nothing," he said too fast. Then, after a pause, "It's just, this place feels off." "Off how?" He shrugged. "I don't know. It's like we're being watched." I rolled my eyes, but his words struck a nerve. I hadn't admitted it to myself yet, but he was right. The air in the cabin was thick, heavy. The silence wasn't calming. It was expectant, like the whole forest was waiting for something. That night, we sat by the fire, eating canned soup. I laid out plans for the next day, hikes, scenic drives, but Rick barely acknowledged me. He just stared into the flames, his jaw clenched tight. "Maybe we should head back tomorrow," he said suddenly. "What? No way. We just got here." I tried to laugh, but it sounded forced. "Come on, it's not that bad. You'll feel better after some sleep." He didn't argue, which was strange for him. Normally, Rick fought over everything, even the little stuff. But tonight, he just nodded, still staring at the fire like he was afraid to look away. As we were getting ready for bed, he broke the silence again. "Hey, what was that thing you mentioned earlier? The local legend. I froze. You mean the forest watchers? Yeah. What's the deal with that? It's just a story, I said quickly. People say the woods are guarded, that you're not supposed to be disrespectful or, draw attention to yourself. He raised an eyebrow. Draw attention how? There's a name you're not supposed to say. They say if you do, they notice you. Rick smirked, and I knew exactly what he was about to do. Don't, I started, but it was too late. He said the name, loud, clear, almost taunting. Immediately, the air felt colder, like a draft had swept through even though the windows were shut tight. Rick, I snapped, sharper than I meant to. That's not funny. Oh, come on, it's just a dumb story, he said, but his smirk was gone. He glanced at the window, his shoulders stiff. That night, I fell asleep quickly, exhausted, but Rick stayed up. I woke once around midnight to the sound of him pacing again. When Rick shook me awake, I thought it was morning. My brain was still foggy, caught between sleep and reality. Get up, he hissed, voice trembling. We have to go. What time is it? I mumbled, reaching for my phone. He grabbed my wrist, stopping me. No, now, get up. The way his voice cracked made my stomach drop. In the dim glow from the bedside lamp, I could see how pale he was, how his jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. Rick, I whispered, throat dry. What's going on? I can't explain. Just pack your stuff. I wanted to argue, but something in his face shut me up. My pulse quickened. He was throwing clothes into his bag, moving fast, glancing over his shoulder like he expected something to burst through the door. Did you hear something? I whispered. He froze. Yes, he admitted, almost too softly to hear. But it wasn't normal. We rushed outside. The cold hit me first, sharp, biting, though it hadn't been this cold earlier. My breath curled in the air as I stuffed my bag in the trunk. Rick was already in the driver's seat, fumbling with the keys. His hands were shaking so badly it took him 3 tries to start the car. What happened? I asked as we sped down the dirt road. He didn't answer right away, just stared ahead, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Finally, he exhaled shakily. I was trying to sleep, but I kept hearing tapping. Could have been the wind. No, he shook his head. It moved. First the window, then the wall, then the door. A shiver ran down my spine. And then, he continued, voice barely above a whisper, I heard them. Them? Whispers. At first, I thought it was the wind, but they got louder. He swallowed hard. Then came the footsteps. I gripped the seat. Footsteps. First outside, then on the porch, then on the roof. The car swerved slightly as he gripped the wheel tighter. Rick, I whispered, heart pounding. I didn't see anything, he admitted, but I felt it, like they were right there. Something flickered in the rearview mirror. Headlights. There's someone behind us, I murmured. Rick's jaw clenched. There wasn't a second ago. The lights sped toward us, too fast, but just as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished. And then, standing in the road ahead, illuminated in our headlights, was the stag. It was massive. Its antlers stretched impossibly high. Its eyes reflected the light in a way that wasn't natural. Rick slammed the brakes. The stag didn't flinch. And then the whispers came again, closer this time, waiting. It was Lucas's idea, of course. It always was. One last trip before summer ends, he had said, grinning like the forest was calling him personally. I didn't have the heart or the guts to say no. That's how we ended up on Black Hollow Trail, 2 backpacks stuffed with gear and me trailing behind him, already regretting it. The day was perfect. Clear skies, warm sun, the kind of afternoon that made you think nothing bad could ever happen. But the closer we got to the trailhead, the quieter everything became. Even the cicadas, which had been shrieking earlier, faded into silence as we stepped under the trees. Come on, Jake, keep up, Lucas called, already a few paces ahead. His backpack swung with every step, his excitement practically radiating off him. I adjusted the straps on mine, wishing I hadn't packed so much, and trudged after him. The trail started off wide and easy, a gentle climb over scattered stones and exposed roots, but it quickly narrowed. Trees pressed in from both sides, their branches tangling overhead. Sunlight filtered through in broken patches, casting long, fractured shadows on the ground. I kept my eyes on Lucas's back, trying to ignore the way the air had cooled, the faint breeze carrying a sour scent, like something was rotting. "Why does it smell like that?" I asked, my voice too loud in the hush. Lucas shrugged. "Probably just animals. Relax, man. It's just a hike." But it wasn't. Not really. Black Hollow wasn't on any map I'd ever seen. The stories about it were vague, half-remembered warnings from older kids who swore they'd seen shadows move or heard voices whispering their names. I hadn't believed them, at least not until now. As we climbed, I started noticing strange markings on the trees. At first, I thought they were scratches, maybe from a bear, but the closer I looked, the less they made sense. Long, jagged lines crossed and spiraled, deliberate and unnatural. "You see these?" I asked, stopping to trace one with my fingers. Lucas barely glanced back. "Probably just some hiker messing around. Let's keep moving. If we don't hurry, we'll lose the light." I wanted to turn around right then. Every instinct screamed at me to go back. But Lucas's confidence was contagious. It always had been. He would charge ahead, laughing at the danger, and I'd follow, too stubborn to be the one who backed out first. By the time we reached Raven's clearing, the sun was low, the sky streaked with deep purples and burning oranges. The clearing was wide, surrounded by cliffs that loomed like silent watchers. Lucas dropped his pack and stretched, grinning. "This is perfect. Look at that view." I sat heavily on a flat rock, my stomach tight. The air was still, unnaturally so. I tried to focus on the cliffs, on the golden light catching their jagged edges, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Lucas, as usual, was oblivious. He grabbed his flashlight and slung his pack over one shoulder. "I'm gonna check out the ridge. Be back in 10. "Wait, what?" I stood up, already reaching for my own flashlight. "You're just gonna wander off? It's getting dark." He laughed, that carefree, cocky laugh that always made me feel like a little kid. "Relax, Jake. I'll be fine. Just get the fire going. I'll be back before you know it." I watched him disappear into the trees, his flashlight beam bouncing ahead of him. For a moment, I considered following, but the thought of being alone in the dark woods was worse than staying put. The fire took longer to start than I expected. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and the kindling Lucas had packed wasn't cooperating. By the time I had a small flame going, the sun was gone, leaving only the flickering light of the fire and the suffocating darkness beyond it. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The fire crackled. Shadows stretched long and sharp. I checked my watch, my stomach twisting. "Lucas," I called. My voice barely carried. The silence pressed in. A snap, like a branch breaking, echoed from the trees. Relief surged through me. "About time," I muttered, stepping toward the noise. But no one answered. The firelight behind me felt impossibly far away as I peered into the darkness. My flashlight flickered, its beam feeble against the thick shadows. I thought I saw movement, a figure slipping between the trees, but when I focused, it was gone. Something wasn't right. I could feel it deep in my chest. A whisper, so faint it was barely more than a breath. "Jake!" I froze. "Lucas!" I whispered, my throat tight. But deep down, I knew it wasn't him. I don't know how long I stood there, gripping my flashlight until my fingers ached. The whisper, my name, soft and stretched, like it didn't belong in this world, hung in the air. Then I saw it. Lucas's backpack, sitting upright in the middle of the trail, like someone had placed it there on purpose. The straps were torn, dirt smeared across the fabric. I crouched down, my hands shaking as I unzipped it. Inside, everything was untouched. His flashlight, an unopened water bottle, his old compass, a crumpled map. Lucas wouldn't have left this behind unless he had no choice. The whisper came again, closer. Jake! I turned, my flashlight sweeping across the trees. A figure stepped out from the shadows. Tall, thin, wrong. Its face, if you could call it that, was a void, an emptiness that seemed to swallow the light. Its limbs were too long, its movements jerky, like a puppet with invisible strings. I ran. The whispers turned into a chorus, voices overlapping, laughing. The trees seemed to shift, their branches clawing at me. When I stumbled into the clearing, the fire was out. The tent was gone. Scratched into the dirt, glowing faintly, were the same spiraling symbols from the trees. I don't remember getting back to town. The forest didn't want to let me go. By the time I stumbled onto the road, my legs barely held me up. Clutched in my hands was Lucas's shredded backpack. The straps were still damp, with something I didn't want to think about. The search party found nothing. Not Lucas, not footprints, just his backpack, abandoned on the trail. And the massive tree near Raven's clearing, its bark carved with those twisting symbols. The search dogs wouldn't go near it. A week later, the nightmares started. Then the whispers. At night, in my dreams, in the quiet moments of the day, always the same. Jake. I never went back to Black Hollow, but I didn't have to. Came with me,